My husband Bill and I came to Kingsport in 1946. We came from our honeymoon, as a matter of fact, and it was a cultural shock because both of us were from Louisville, Kentucky. I was just recently out of the waves in the Navy, and anyway, so we arrived in the dark in December, and I swear the sun never shone until March, absolutely March. And then we had this odd smell in this town, and we couldn't figure out what that was. Well, my husband was a chemical engineer, and he had been hired by Tennessee Eastman, so as a result, the smell. So he explained what that was. And one of my funny memories in early Kingsport was I went to W.B. Green Hardware Company, which used to be on Center Street, right behind the bank, First National Bank. And I went into the gift department, and a very nice little lady came up to wait on me. She reminded me of Minnie Pearl without the hat with the tag. And anyway, I made my purchase, and she said, "Shall I put it in a poke?" And I said, "No, thank you, just a paper bag." That was colloquialism to me. I've gotten used to the poke for a paper bag now. I've been very active in the community. I think I've been on every board in the city, and very active in St. Paul's Episcopal Church, and done everything there except janitor, I think. Well, I have, obviously, Bill, we have two sons who live respectively in Wilmington, North Carolina, and Reston, Virginia. One is an architect and one is a retired meteorologist. They are both hardy, but they're also in their 60s and moving up. My older one, he'll be 70 next year. And I thought, oh my Lord, how could a child of mine be that old? But it works out because I will be 95 in July. So, two things. The education system is excellent, and I think they should quit fiddling with education anyway. Oh, by the way, in my checkered career, I went back to school after the boys left and got a master's in library science and was a librarian at Linview High School for 12 years. But anyway, I think they should maintain their excellent education system, and this was, and I guess it still is, a wonderful place to raise children.
I'm originally from Kansas. I came to Kingsport as a bride in 1949. Dale, my husband Dale, had been, fresh out of college, KU, and Eastman had hired him. He was a chemical engineer. And when we were living in Kansas City at the time he was hired, and so when Dale went down to Union Station to get the ticket to make arrangements for us to come down here on the train, and the ticket agent there looked and looked and looked, and finally he said, "Well, son, I don't think you can get there from here." And but he did. He got us here, and we left. I remember we left Kansas City on Monday night, train to St. Louis, changed trains there, on to Cincinnati, and from Cincinnati we went to Knoxville, changed trains in Knoxville. And it was when we walked into the train station in Knoxville that I noticed, for the first time I'd ever seen, two water fountains, colored and white. And I thought, uh-oh, we're in the South. But anyway, that was fine, and we came on and we arrived in Kingsport on the Clinchfield Railroad. Now later, not many people would believe that we actually had passenger train then, but we did. And we took a cab then. They had told us that we would have a room at the Kingsport Inn. And as course, we could have walked the three blocks from the train station to the Kingsport Inn. But anyway, we took the cab. We didn't know where it was. And as we approached the Kingsport Inn, I got my first view of the church circle. And all those churches around that circle. And I remember having the greatest feeling about this is a good place to live. And so for 65 years, we had a good place to live. We were happy here, had our 3 children here. They all graduated from Dobbins-Bennett. I had 2 boys played baseball on the Dobbins-Bennett baseball team, and then went on to college. I don't know what else I can say except that I have enjoyed Kingsport. I've done a lot of volunteer work here at the hospital and PTAs and schools and so on and so forth. And we joined the Methodist Church. I was raised a Baptist, but we joined the Methodist Church because I thought it would upset his mother more if he became a Baptist than it would my mother if I became a Methodist. I know when my husband retired from Eastman, first thing, not the first thing, but almost the first thing he said was, he says, you know, I think it's about time I did some volunteer work. And so he got into the volunteer work. He volunteered with, he helped to teach reading, that, and then he helped with the carpenter's helpers down at our church. He was a great craftsman himself, and he would take old furniture that had been donated for people and bring it home to his workshop and repair it, make it new. People think, when they get to be our age, they think, well, I haven't done anything special. I don't have anything to write about. I don't have, there's nothing special about me, nothing special about my life. But your grandchildren think there is. Yeah. And you need to write about your life so your grandchildren will know who you were. Well, the first one I wrote was a Christmas book about short Christmas memories and that sort of thing. That sold real well. And then the next one I wrote was about World War II and my hometown during the war, and sold quite a few of those too. And then my husband and I wrote one for the grandchildren about their ancestors, and they really appreciated that. We gave that to all the grandchildren for Christmas one year. But and I've been published in several magazines and so on, and short stories and articles and stuff. But I liked writing. I liked expressing myself. Once you make friends here, it seems like they're friends for life. I think you know too that when we live out here, and we have so many friends here that we've had ever since we've been in Kingsport. Right. And they're just real good people, and I'm so glad that we came here, because when we told my parents that we were moving to Tennessee, my dad said, "Tennessee? We'll never see you again." And my mom spoke up and said something about, well, that car still runs. And they made many trips down here. They liked Kingsport, and so I've lived a good life here.
My family moved, they were at Gate City, and my father worked at Eastman. So when the week I was 12 years old, my family moved to Kingsport. And we moved on to East Center Street, right where the road turns over to Lincoln School. Well, first of all, I was not used to all that traffic going by the front door. And on Center Street in that block between Summer Street and Lamont Street. There were two houses, one on this corner and one on that corner. Nothing in between. My next door neighbors had a cow staked in that field over there. So they would go over there and milk the cow. And that went on, I guess, until Second World War, and that's when they built all those little brick houses that are on East Center Street now. But I stayed with my grandparents until school was out, which was about 3 months, in Virginia, so I didn't have to switch schools at the end. So I would come to catch the bus after school on Friday, ride the bus to Kingsport. My parents would meet me at the bus station, and I would spend the weekend over here, but I don't know whether it was Pet Dairy or Foremost, whoever delivered milk at that point. They delivered it with a horse pulling a little truck thing. So it would wake me up every time I'd hear that clop, 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 you know. That was a strange sound for me. And, they would, and that horse, to my 12-year-old mind, was just amazing because it knew which houses took the milk from them, which houses it didn't. It went right on by. I thought that was a miracle. But it was a good time to move to Kingsport because I was changing from elementary to junior high school. So I was not the only new kid on the block when I got there. I graduated on 1 week, and a week later I went to work at Eastman in the engineering department. Worked out there for about 6.5 years. Quit when I had my first child. Never got paid for working again. I had 2 boys, and I was from a family of girls, so having 2 boys was quite an experience for me. But I've been real fortunate with my family. I really have. I think a lot of it is the friendliness of the people. Because even though I was an outsider coming in, everybody made me feel welcome. I didn't, but one time when they were getting ready to discontinue one of the trains that stopped at Kingsport, my husband took our 2 boys and me to Bristol, put us on the train, and we rode from Bristol to Kingsport. And he met us here just so the children could say they had ridden on the train.
We moved in 72, we moved in 73, and we moved in 75. But we ended up in Kingsport. And that's the best part of the story, that we ended up in Kingsport, because it's a great city. And we were very comfortable here because it was a city with a lot of technical people, because we came from the Chemical Valley in Charleston, West Virginia. My husband eventually worked for Meat Paper, and then for Willamette, and then for Weyerhaeuser, and retired from Weyerhaeuser. Today it's called Domtar. But we went through several years with Mead saying that they were going to close the mill. And I was sitting with 2 little boys thinking, oh, we're going to have to move again. Headhunters were calling because they'd heard about it. And one of them said to me, you're the one that doesn't want to go to Louisiana, aren't you? And I said, well, I won't say what I said. But I let him know that, no, yes, I'm the one that doesn't want to go to the swamps of Louisiana. The best part about Kingsport for me is the community. It's a community that cares for people. We lived in Colonial Heights. We watched it grow. And boys went to Sullivan County schools. Very good school system. Kingsport School, excellent school system too. Today I tutor in Kingsport City Schools in kindergarten, 1st grade. And, you can be 75 and still be helping someone. I helped one little boy named Connor in the 1st grade who could not write. He didn't know how to make a circle, and his name was Connor, Conor. And he is going to Sevier next year. And he the principal told me that he did great work this year. So, it's a big heart. The city has a big heart and a lot of caring people. And I love living here. I love living here.
I had been working for a company called Bonet Fiber in Elizabethton, Tennessee, and they were going out of business, going bankrupt basically, and we had been living in East Tennessee long enough to really say this is the place we want to live. We were originally from Charleston, West Virginia, both of us, and we both decided or agreed that this is a good place to live, and so I started looking for work to keep me in East Tennessee, and came to Kingsport with a job with Abernathy Thomas Engineering Company, which is a manufacturer's representative company. And I'm a degree mechanical engineer from West Virginia University. And they wanted an engineer who was licensed. I wasn't licensed. I wasn't a professional engineer at the time, but I told them I would become licensed, which I did while I was working for them. Was traveling a lot, and with a young family, I decided I wanted to stay closer home, so I started looking for work in Kingsport that would keep me closer in, and found a job at Mead Paper and joined them in October of '77. And was very happy to be there and in the engineering department there as a project engineer. And one thing that discouraged me a little bit there early on was I read a report that Mead had done had a viability study done on the mill here, and decided it was short-lived, that they put it in a maintenance category. The equipment was all quite old, and that was kind of discouraging, thinking that they probably would eventually close that mill. But we were able to get the largest project I worked on was something like a $12 million project, which was a major bleaching chemical change, which kind of helped the viability of the mill to keep going for a while. But in the early 90s, they decided it was time to close the door to sell. And so for a few years there, we weren't sure what was going to happen. And fortunately, a company called Willamette decided to buy the mill here and do something with it. So they did and started doing things, and eventually that was in '95. I believe it was in 2002. They had the project well along. 2002, Weyerhaeuser bought the mill and continued the project, and has converted that paper mill to a fine, modern paper mill, and it's still very viable today. But I decided to retire in mid 2003, and during the startup of some of that new project, and decided I wasn't really ready to totally retire, and talked to the people over at Abernathy Thomas, and they're still in business there today, and asked them if they needed some help. So I went back to work for them another 3.5 years, full time, and mainly traveling East Tennessee territory, including Knoxville and Oak Ridge and down to Chattanooga, and enjoyed that. But then after 3.5 years, I decided it was time to hang that up. So and then consulted some with the paper mill back for a couple of years after that, and did some work there. But now I'm fully retired and enjoying it here at Asbury.
I came here in July of 1973 to be pastor of First Broad Street United Methodist Church. The two churches, First Church and Broad Street, had merged in 1969. It was not handled very well. The people, especially in First Church, felt they were forced to merge. A lot of people moved their membership, went to other churches, and we had a problem with the use of the buildings. The church was not using the former First Church building at all. It had been leased downstairs to the alcohol and drug rehabilitation, which angered people from First Church. They said that's where our children went to Sunday school. Then the upstairs former sanctuary was leased to the Theater Guild, and people did not like having plays where they had worshiped before. I think even the window that was in the sanctuary was still there. And the first year I was here, our total maintenance budget was used on the first building. An air conditioning unit went out, I think. So our total budget was, maintenance budget was spent for a building we weren't even using at all. So we tried to get the city to help us do something about that building because the church still owned it. It's in a historical area, so they wouldn't let us take it down. First Broad Street Church had a parking problem then. It still has a parking problem, always will, because even some of the parking lots are a block or two away from the church building. The church, First Broad Street Church, only has about 3 acres of property down in the middle of town. We tried to sell the building. Who's going to buy a church building? We tried to sell it to fraternities, lodges, things like that. So I remember the chairman of the trustees, Mr. Ed Gunther, says, "Why don't we just give the building to the city?" And I said, "Well, Ed, they surely wouldn't take it." But to my surprise, they did. The city accepted the former First Church building. And I don't remember how many years they kept it, but they discovered having the same problems we were having with maintenance and so on. So eventually they gave it back to the church. So First Broad Street Church still owns both of those buildings now. Right now, it's been a long time since I've been pastor there, but right now, the main use we make of the former First Church building is a preschool program. On Saturdays and Sunday mornings, we have what they call a friendship diner. Anybody that comes in for breakfast on Saturday or Sunday morning, they give a free breakfast. But other than that, we do not use the building at all. And it has maintenance problems. It has not been taken care of the way it should have been. It's been an interesting thing across the years as I served and have come back here to live and attend First Broad Street Church. It's been a long time since the two churches came together. But it's kind of like the feelings about the Civil War. The northern and southern churches are now united, but they haven't completely healed. And it's funny how occasionally it tends to flare up, and people get upset about something that sometimes happened even before they were born. It has to do with our institutions. People remember which college was northern, which college was southern. They remember that our home for children was belonged to the Southern Methodist Church, and hospital we have in Oak Ridge that bears the Methodist name, but it was built by the federal government after the Northern and Southern Methodist churches came together. But in my lifetime, I have seen my family belonged to the Northern Methodist Church when I was growing up. My mother grew up in the Southern Methodist Church, and my father grew up in the Northern Methodist Church. And it's funny how families were split by this, the Civil War, and again, things that happened before any of us were born, but it still goes on. And I'm afraid our country will never really get over the effects of this terrible Civil War that happened. But we keep going. The churches, I'm not saying they shouldn't have merged, but both of them were small, strong churches. I think First Methodist Church had over 1,000 members, and Broad Street Church had over 2,000 members. So they came together with over 2,800 members years ago. But I've enjoyed living in Kingsport. Came back here after my retirement, and I've served since then and as an interim pastor in actually 8 or 10 churches in the Tri-Cities area. Living at Baysmont now, been down here for a little over 3 years, and I'm glad to share this with you. Thank you.